SLT speed up සවාරිය සමගින් සද්දන්ත වාසි රැල්ලක්. අලුත් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සබඳතා සඳහා පළමු මාස දෙක පුරා data double speed up with SLT.
Making headlines on First at 9. The report nobody cared for. The Delimitation Report on the Provincial Council election fails to attract a single vote in favour. Even the subject minister votes against.
It is an independent report which is submitted for all members to look into it, and if there is a disagreement, to go into the appellate process.
What a muddle. Warnings over Japanese defence minister's visit to Hambantota port.
The current Sri Lankan government is getting Sri Lanka involved in a future warfare in the region.
Slippery slope. The rupee slumps to an all-time low.
And that is going to cause the dollar to appreciate.
Trade war. Other nations feel the squeeze from the US-China trade conflict.
And really, in the current circumstances, a conflict between the two is unimaginable from the perspective of the rest of the world.
Australia gets a new PM. Scott Morrison takes oath as the 6th Australian Prime Minister since 2006.
A very good evening to you and welcome to First at 9 on Other Derana 24/7, Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Katharina Chang. Now moving on to your top story tonight. The second phase of the VIPRE Canal project and the renovation of 2,400 rural tanks got underway today under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena. The ceremony organised to mark the launch was worked off in the area of Kumakulawa of Polpitigama.
The project to resurrect and renovate 2,400 rural tanks which are currently not in use in the dry zone commenced today under the auspices of President Maithripala Sirisena. The project aims to resupply irrigation water for the populace in the dry zone. The President broke ground during the relevant ceremony organised in the area of Kumakulawa of Polpitigama. In the meantime, the second phase of the VIPRE Canal project, which bids to divert water from the river Mahavali to the upper parts of the northwestern province, also got underway under the patronage of the President. The estimated cost of the mega project, expected to finish in 2024, is 16 billion rupees, and it will provide water from River Mahavali to approximately 105,000 acre-feet of water to various areas in the Kurunegala district. The project will supply water to 12,500 hectares of farmland, 13,500 farming families. It also supplies drinking water, and around 40,000 families are set to benefit from the project. President Maithripala Sirisena declared open the project office and then also participated in the inauguration ceremony.
Had the work of the Moragahakanda Kaluganga project continued after the foundation stone was laid in 2007, this ceremony, which marks water being provided to the northwest, could have been held 5 years ago. When work of the Moragahakanda project was completed over the last 3 years and water was finally provided, I heard someone say that only water was left to be filled when this government came to power in 2015. Those are humorous comments.
The joint opposition is accusing the government of attempting to delay elections in hope it will buy them time to address its inadequacies, especially in the economic sector. Speaking at a media briefing held in Colombo today, the joint opposition invites the public to rally around them to protest against the government.
Our position has been that elections needs to be held on time. Our stand today is no different. We have experienced a delay of 9 months pertaining to 3 provincial council elections. Further 3 more elections are due within 2 months. And our stand even this time is to go with the process which will expedite the elections. We are not against the present system which is proposed. What we are saying is, if the present system is going to take more time and if that's going to take away from the franchise of the people, we feel feel then this lengthy process needs to be discussed with all stakeholders, and then we can reach some compromise. But in due time, elections needs to be held. And we feel this is an attempt by this government in order to cover their inadequacies, particularly pertaining to the economic performance of the country and the instability of the country pertaining to general administration in all aspects. We feel that the government is now in a position not to hold elections, and thereby this internal conflict within the government has been created in order to further the elections from the masses. We want to invite all the democratic loving people of this country, if they are not satisfied with the performance of this government, we feel that everybody needs to come out on the 5th of September as a mark of protest against this government.
The delimitation report pertaining to the upcoming provincial council elections was defeated in Parliament today without a single vote in favour. 139 parliamentarians voted against the report, while no one voted in favour of the report. The Minister who tabled the report in Parliament, all factions of the government, the joint opposition as well as the Tamil National Alliance voted against the report, while Janata Vimukti Peramuna refrained from voting.
If you pass this delimitation report in Parliament, the Election Commission gets the power to announce an election tomorrow itself. But your attempt is to defeat the report in Parliament and postpone elections. This is an attempt to postpone elections. Are you asking us to help you in postponing elections? The government can come up with a suggestion to the Election Commission that the election can be held under the existing system. We can't accept the delimitation report put forth today, and we decided to reject it. Now everyone wants to hold the elections soon. I personally believe that if we are to hold elections under the new system, we can't do it soon. Myself and the United National Party believe it's prudent to go for elections under the old system. This is not a game, therefore we have to deal with the representation system well. This report discusses bonus seats, which is the mechanism given for minorities to have equal representation. That system too is rejected in this. It only mentions the system but doesn't implement it. How can we believe the report? Therefore we reject it.
Honourable members of Parliament, today you all are deciding whether an appellate process should adjudicate this report, and if there are shortcomings to correct it. This delimitation report has been submitted by me, and some say it has been submitted by the government. It is an independent report which is submitted for all members to look into it, and if there is a disagreement, to go into the appellate process. But I see that this is a very progressive step taken by Parliament. I respectfully urge that all should support this, and also there are certain parties who are saying that this system is detrimental to minorities. It is not the system that is detrimental to the minorities, it is this delimitation report.
In the meantime, during the party leaders' meeting held today, it was decided that a vote should be held to decide on delimitation report of the provincial council elections at the end of the debate.
පක්ෂව ඡන්ද කිසිවක් ඇත්තේ නැහැ. විරුද්ධව ඡන්ද 139යි. ඡන්ද විමසීමේ ප්‍රතිඵල අනුව පළාත් සභා මැතිවරණ කොට්ටාස සීමානින්න කමිටු වාර්තාව 3න් 2ක ඡන්දෙන් සම්මත නොවූ බව මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ දන්වමි.
Accordingly, the report was not passed in Parliament, and the Speaker will appoint a review committee headed by the Prime Minister, and it will hand over a report consisting proposals on holding provincial council elections within 2 months. Once the President receives the report, he will announce the names of electorates and their limitations.
Convener of the Patriotic Professionals Forum, Dr. Lanka Ports, warns that the government is running the risk of being embroiled in future warfare through its short-sighted move to accompany the Japanese Prime Minister of Defence on Sri Lankan port visits. Dr. Ports sounds the alarm in a backdrop where the visiting Japanese Minister of Defence, Itsunori Onodera, visited the Hambantota port recently and made a statement to international media that the port should be open to all countries, ensuring freedom of navigation.
Japanese Minister of Defence Itsunori Onodera arrived in Sri Lanka on the 20th, making it the first occasion a Japanese Defence Minister set foot on Sri Lankan soil. After calling on President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, he paid a visit to the Hambantota port on Wednesday after visiting the Eastern Naval Command in Trincomalee. Local media was not allowed to cover the event. However, speaking to Japanese broadcaster NHK, the Chinese defense minister, speaking of the Hambantota port, said that Japan's concern is that the port is located in a crucial shipping route and, quote, he received confirmation that Sri Lanka will not permit China to use the port solely for military purposes, unquote.
Despite China's long-term lease, it is internationally acknowledged that the port should be free and open to the public.
In such a backdrop, experts expressed their views over the Japanese defense minister's visit to the Hambantota port.
This is a very significant statement and a very significant visit. In 2007, America, India, Australia and Japan came to a military cooperation agreement which is called QUAD. The whole idea of QUAD was to safeguard these countries against an emerging military threat from China. And now when Japan come to Sri Lanka talking against China, and there are indications that Japan is also looking at getting involved in the Trincomalee harbour. Essentially, what is happening is the current Sri Lankan government, which is extremely short-sighted, is getting Sri Lanka involved in a future warfare in the region. If there's a war where China will fight against these other countries, Sri Lanka will invariably be involved by giving away our ports.
Hambantota also is a serious concern to all these nations. I think when you look at the geopolitical challenge that Sri Lanka is facing because of its geostrategic location, we are looking at a balanced approach, balancing the triple spear of interest to the nation. This sort of balancing is not possible because of the large economic interest of certain nations such as China. So, a Japanese minister's statement that it shouldn't be a military outpost or it shouldn't have any military characteristics is all up to us. We could decide because they already have military outposts set up in the Indian Ocean.
Former President's Chief of Staff Gamini Senarath and 4 others arrived before the newly established Permanent High Court at Bar this morning. This is incidentally the first case heard before the newly set up Permanent High Court aimed at expediting cases of large-scale corruption and fraud.
The 3-member judge bench of the newly established Permanent High Court comprised of High Court judges Sampath Abekon, Sampath Wijeratne and Champa Janaki Rajaratne. The first case to be taken up before the 3-judge bench was that of former President's Chief of Staff Gamini Senarath, including 4 others. The defendants are accused of illegally investing 500 million rupees of public funds, which had been given by Electrogas Company to Canville Holdings Limited at Helenco Hotels and Spa. Therefore, an indictment pertaining 24 charges against the 4 defendants were filed before the Special High Court this morning. Following the hearing, the court ordered that each suspect be released on a cash bail of 100,000 rupees and 2 personal sureties of 1 million rupees each. The suspects were also ordered surrender their passports to the court, banning them from overseas travel. Furthermore, Deputy Solicitor General appearing on behalf of the Attorney General said that steps will be taken to hand over the relevant documents of the case to the defendants and requested time. The High Court bench accordingly postponed the case until the 19th of September and said that the date of the hearing will be fixed on that day. According to our correspondent, 61 individuals were named as witnesses and 92 documents were presented in the case. Meanwhile, the Attorney General's Department today filed a case with the newly set up Permanent High Court at Bar against former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa and 6 others over the misappropriation of state funds when building the D.A. Rajapaksa Museum. However, the Colombo Chief Magistrate yesterday ordered former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa and 6 others to appear before the Colombo Magistrates Court on the 7th of next month.
Now, railway trade unions decided to commence a continuous strike action from midnight on the 29th. The decision was reached during the Executive Committee meeting held today, owing to the lack of a proper response from authorities with regard to rectifying their salary anomalies. Earlier in the day, the Railway Guards Union also announced that they will commence a strike action from midnight on the 29th. Railway trade union representatives, including engine drivers, controller guards and station masters, held discussions with President Maithripala Sirisena and government officials yesterday. However, speaking to reporters following the meeting, several trade union representatives said that talks were unsuccessful. Rahul Gandhi's reference in Germany to terror group ISIS while warning about the impact of excluding people from development has provoked a sharp reaction back in India from the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, accusing Congress President Rahul Gandhi of belittling India and presenting it in a bad light. The BJP yesterday said Rahul had justified terrorism and lied to attack the Narendra Modi government. Now, it was a notable point that in his speech, Rahul Gandhi expressed sympathetic sentiments over the death of former LTTE leader VIPRE Prabhakaran.
Rahul Gandhi's remarks made in Germany created a whirlwind back in India, with the Bharatiya Janata Party seeking an explanation from the President of the Congress. Addressing a gathering in Hamburg on Wednesday, Rahul cited the example of Islamic State to say that exclusion of a larger number of people from the development process could lead to creation of terrorist groups. He also accused the BJP-led government of excluding tribals, Dalits and minorities from the development narrative and said this could be a dangerous thing.
The United States attacked Iraq in 2003 and you got an insurgency that fought the United States and caused massive casualties to the Americans. That insurgency slowly entered the empty space in Iraq. It entered the empty space in Syria. I'm explaining this because if you don't give people a vision in the 21st century, somebody else will give them one. And that is the real risk of excluding large numbers of people from our development processes. Every country faces this risk.
BJP spokesperson Sambit Patra told the media that Rahul Gandhi left no opportunity to belittle India and to tarnish the image of India.
Well, yes, this is a democratic and a beautiful country. You can always speak about the policies of this country anywhere in this world. But for God's sake, when you denigrate this country, when you denigrate not only the policies in a wrong way, but when you speak against the culture of this great country, and when you give justification to terrorism, it is a serious issue, Rahulji, and that's the reason as to why you should come out and you should speak, you should explain.
During a Q&A session at the same event, Rahul Gandhi expressed sympathetic views towards leader of the fallen terrorist organization in Sri Lanka, Velupillai Prabhakaran.
In 2009, I saw the person who killed my father lying in a field in Sri Lanka. And I called up my sister and I said to my sister, Priyanka, this is very strange, but I'm not happy. And the reason I wasn't happy was because I saw myself in his children. The violence that was done against him was impacting others. If you want to truly get into it, you have to understand the person who's being violenced's perspective. It's not just a random event. Some action, some violence done against him or her has triggered it.
First at 9, meanwhile questioned lecturer of the University of Colombo, Asanga Abegunasekara, as to his opinions over the remarks made by the Congress leader and how such speeches would affect the India-Sri Lanka relations, especially with India set to go for polls next year.
I don't see any impact on Indo-Sri Lanka relationship at all. Relationship between the two countries, as Lakshman Kadirigama said, it's lost in the mist, the ancient past. So we have a strong relationship. It was more of a personal statement, and he has reconciled and he's ready to sort of reconcile and look for a better future now.
Let us now cross over to a short commercial break and join you with some business news on the other side.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Welcome back to the news. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe highlights the necessity to strengthen the construction sector, which is weakened by several factors, including droughts and floods the country suffered during the last year. Speaking at the Construction Exhibition 2018, the Premier also touched on the issue of payments to contractors and said that directions are given to identify agencies which are lagging behind payments, so necessary measures can be taken to mitigate the situation.
Construction Exhibition 2018 was declared open at the Bandaranaike Memorial International Conference Hall in Colombo under the patronage of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe.
So in different ways we are looking at certainly work, taking on construction work that will help all of you. We are also now looking at self-funded projects where you bring in the funds and then we will repay the contractor. Now you are also facing difficulties. One of the main issues has been payment to contractors. I know now that's the big problem even among us. Because when we with difficulty find the money, sometimes we find it doesn't go to the contractor. Or sometimes we find that kissing goes by favor. Somewhere down the line, those who should pay by priority have to wait for others to go in. Now, this is not the intention of the government. So now this has become an issue. I said, identify all the agencies where payment is really behind time. And then we will start working on it. One major issue on repayment, which we can do. We want the local construction sector to be strong. To be strong means be able to meet competition and to be able to withstand it. First and foremost, the Singapore FTA does not in any way affect the status quo. Because all we have done is in all these agreements, there are prohibited areas and non-prohibited. Prohibited areas are small. Now the non-prohibited areas we have taken off the Pakistan FTA. So if the Pakistan FTA was good enough for previous governments, it should be the same wording, should be good enough this one's also. But if there are any issues, we have an annual review process.
Meanwhile, former ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, Dr. Palta Kohona, says the trade war between China and United States is unimaginable from the perspective of the rest of the world. The former ambassador added that Sri Lanka should, in its own small way, encourage the two economic superpowers to desist from confronting each other. He expressed these views at a media briefing to announce the Sri Lanka Economic Conclave and Investment Conclave held in Beijing on China next month.
Of course, we have heard about the current disequilibrium in the world marketplace resulting from an emerging, possibly emerging conflict with China and the United States. However, many of us, or all of us, hope that this will not result in an all-out trade war between the two countries. At the end of the day, if something of this nature happens, both the United States and China will suffer, and so will the rest of the world, because the US is the biggest economy in the world, China is the second biggest. And really, in the current circumstances, a conflict between the two is unimaginable from the perspective of the rest of the world. We can, in our very small way, contribute to encouraging these two giants to desist from confronting each other and instead work together in cooperation. Sri Lanka is a small country and we cannot get involved in somebody else's conflict. We need to work with every country that is available to work with. As we progress from being a middle-income country at the lower end into a higher status, we need investments, we need foreign direct investments in a big way, we need markets, and we need technology.
The Sri Lanka rupee depreciated further today, selling at 162 rupees and 11 cents against the US dollar, a record low. Speaking to First at 9, senior lecturer of the University of Colombo, Dr. Indrajit Aponzi, says that with the interest rates hike expected in September, it is likely that the rupee could depreciate further. Meanwhile, speaking at an event today, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe said that economic warfare in the global arena has impacted certain key imports, such as fuel, amidst the depreciation of the rupee.
The Sri Lankan rupee hit a record low as the selling price reached 162 rupees and 11 cents against the dollar today. According to reports, imported dollar demand and foreign outflows from government securities weighed on the currency. Furthermore, the CBSL in its external sector performance report said that as of May 2018, reflecting cross-currency movements, the Sri Lankan rupee depreciated against several major currencies except for the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar and the Indian rupee during this period. It is in this backdrop the rupee has lost 0.9% so far this month and 4.9% so far this year.
Now this brings the total exchange rate change from January 2015 to 2018 August, something like 30 rupees. If you look at it from the overall point of view, that means within the 3 years, rupee has lost 30 rupees. From a long-term perspective, why the exchange rate has been depreciating so much within the last 3 years is very much a domestic affairs. When you have a situation where economic growth is down, there is a necessity that the imports have to supplement, and that could create the exchange rate under pressure because the dollars are flowing out of the country. The US Federal Reserve, the central bank of the US, has said in their meeting 2 days ago that the interest rates are going to be increased in the US, which means it's going to suck a lot of funds from this part of the world into the US, and that is going to cause the dollar to appreciate. The possibility that the next interest rate hike is going to take place in September, that means we are going to live with this kind of exchange rate pressure, and it is likely that the rupee can depreciate further.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe said that appreciation of the dollar has affected many countries around the world.
We are also being faced with the problem of the appreciation of the dollar, and that is affecting all the local currency contracts in Sri Lanka. It's worse even in India and others. Now these are, I hope it will be a short-term phenomena we have to look at, because a lot of the countries are getting affected by the dollar appreciating, and also the economic warfare that is now taking place, that affects certain key supplies like fuel. So all these are issues which in the short term we have to watch what is happening there. It's not within our control.
With that, let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies around the world. The Osha price index fell 0.05% to 6,052.69, hovering near its lowest close since 30th of March 2017 hit on Tuesday. It closed marginally higher for the week after 4 straight weekly falls. Foreign buying accounted for about half of the day's turnover of 209.5 million rupees, which was well below this year's daily average of 822 million rupees. Foreign investors purchased a net 32.3 million rupees of shares, making them net buyers for a second straight session after 5 consecutive sessions of sales. With that, we have Stefan Diavis from NDB Securities for a detailed report as to how the shares performed during the week.
During the week, the ASPI edged up by 0.03%, mainly due to price gains in counters such as Ceylon Tobacco Company, Selinco Insurance and John Keel's Holdings. Meanwhile, the S&P SL20 decreased by 0.8%. The average daily turnover during the week was up from last week to 483 million rupees. Foreigners remained active for the week, closing as net buyers, where foreign purchases accounted for 52% of the total weekly turnover.
Australia got its 6th Prime Minister since 2009 today as Treasurer Scott Morrison won a vote in a 3-way battle for the Liberal Party leadership. Ex-PM Malcolm Turnbull described the situation as an insurgency which rendered him the 4th Premier in a decade to be ousted internally. After being sworn in, Prime Minister Morrison signalled there would be no punishment for the man who led the botched leadership challenge this week, with former Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton tipped to stay in Cabinet.
It has been a turbulent week in Australian politics. Malcolm Turnbull, who survived a leadership vote earlier in the week, couldn't hang on to the Liberal Party's leadership and with it the premiership. A party ballot was held today where incumbent PM Malcolm Turnbull did not contest. It was a 3-way battle between former Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, who narrowly lost a leadership vote against Turnbull on Tuesday, Treasurer Scott Morrison and Foreign Minister Julie Bishop. After the vote, Australian Liberals Chief Government Whip Nola Marino made this announcement.
The successful candidate was Scott Morrison, and he won this vote by 45 votes to 40 for Peter Dutton. In relation to the deputy's position, this was won in a overwhelming sense, in a majority, an absolute majority, by Josh Frydenberg.
Rather surprisingly, Scott Morrison becomes Australia's 6th Prime Minister since 2009. The Liberal Party is the senior partner in the ruling Conservative coalition that will face an election by May 2019.
Bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Australia, so help me God.
Under the Australian system, as in the UK, the Prime Minister is not directly elected by voters, but is the leader of the party or coalition, can command a majority in Parliament. If ousted PM Turnbull resigns from Parliament, he would leave the new government facing a by-election for his Sydney seat that could see it lose its one-seat majority. Turnbull said yesterday he believed that former Prime Ministers are best out of the Parliament, and today, as he addressed media following the leadership vote, Turnbull touched on the future of his parliamentary membership. His choice of word to describe the recent events was insurgency.
I was impressed by how many of my colleagues spoke or voted for loyalty above disloyalty. How the insurgents were not rewarded by electing Mr Dutton, for example, but instead my successor, who I wish the very best, of course, Scott Morrison, a very loyal and effective treasurer. Oh no, I'll be leaving the Parliament, before too long. As I've always said, I've been very clear about that. It's not a secret. Well, Phil, it's obvious. Australians will be just dumbstruck and so appalled by the conduct of the last week. To imagine that a government would be rocked by this sort of disloyalty and deliberate, insurgency is the best way to describe it, deliberate destructive action.
Turnbull becomes the fourth Australian Prime Minister to be ousted internally within a decade, and not a single leader in recent times has succeeded in serving a full term as Prime Minister.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
Well, since it's Friday, we end the week with a heartwarming story. A son who is mentally disabled was on a trip with his sister for 5 days in New York City and was excited to be back home to see his father. The pure love that this father and son have for each other is so beautiful that homecoming don't get any better than this.
I don't think we had a good time.
You need a shade.
And with that, we conclude this edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining us and have a pleasant weekend.